GM, and welcome to another week of WoW Wednesday. Today is super special because it's also International Women's Day, clearly an important moment for all of us women who are on this spaces, as well as just in general for the WoW community. It is a day for us to celebrate womanhood and also acknowledge some of the challenges that come with it. Super grateful to have Shannon Snow, our COO, as today's guest. GM Shannon.
Hello, hello. I'm so honored to be here. And I do believe that at World of Women, every day is International Women's Day. So happy for everyone who's here now with us and joining this conversation.
Thank you, Shannon. I love that. I do think that with the culture that we have here, it does feel like Women's Day every day. And I hope that we're able to make this like a broader thing as well. I also want to introduce Humans of WoW, aka Mitoshi, is the rep that's joining us today. Humans of WoW is a community initiative that humanizes the person behind the PFP. They write spotlights on many of our community members and are doing a great job at showcasing talent within the WoW community. So please make sure you check them out, visit their Medium, drop a follow. And we're super grateful to have them here with us to be interviewing Shannon together.
Good morning. So happy to be here. Happy International Women's Day. And I'd like to note that I'm speaking with Shannon and Kashfi, both strong women that I admire from other parts of the world, from different sides of the world, which is so amazing. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so Shannon, you're such a public facing figure in the WoW community. So many of us look up to you. We just kind of want to get started on your pre-WoW story. Usually my first question to guests that come on WoW Wednesday is tell us your WoW story. But your WoW story is one of the most famous ones, and we want to know your pre-WoW story. What was your life like before World of Women? Tell us about your background and where you're coming in from.
Well, I do appreciate you asking this because a lot of times people will tell me that so much of your life has been focused on women's equality. My husband tells me all the time that the lens I view the world sometimes is one of gender. And I think it is because of some of the experiences I went through before WoW. When I was 14, I started going to a high school that had recently changed from being an all-male Jesuit high school to accepting women. And it was one of these moments where I felt really lucky to be there. But I realized that that whole high school was created not for women. Everything was in a man's image. It was for a man's world. And while I thought the education that I got was fantastic, it was such a lens that was helpful to me to say, hey, I'm living in a space that wasn't created for me and the rules are different and I have to work harder and differently in order to be seen here. And because of that reason, I decided to attend undergrad at Wellesley College, which some in the US may know is an all-women's college. It has notable graduates, including Hillary Clinton, Madeleine Albright, some of the leaders that we've seen in sort of the early generation of women leaders that broke through. And I think what I learned from that experience was there are so many times as a woman where you don't even realize it, but you've been taught to look to others. For me, this was the first day I walked on campus. I knew I wanted to join the college radio station. And I walked into this room of totally technical equipment, knobs, things everywhere, super technical. And usually you would look around and say, where's the tech guy to handle all this? And it was us. It was the women. And so for me, it was just this moment of I shouldn't be waiting for someone to step in to lead. I have to step up. I have to be more technical. I have to learn. I have to get out of my comfort zone. And it was also really preparatory for me to say, hey, there may be times when I'm uncomfortable, but I know that the leadership is within me if I put that effort and if I lean on the women around me. And so those two experiences were really formative because as I continued to my career, went to grad school in Silicon Valley, ended up joining tech, I kept encountering spaces where they weren't built for me, where it wasn't native that women would be there. And so I was able to recognize that from my experience in high school and then pull from my experience in college that it's okay. I have the skills. I just have to think differently, learn, and step up in order to operate in that environment. So that's a little bit of the framing. For those who are less familiar with my story, since then, I built a really successful career in traditional tech, 11 and a half years at Google, working my way up from ground up through building teams, both domestically and internationally, and then came to Meta, where I again worked within that team to eventually head US entertainment, helping companies move into the metaverse before finding my dream job at WoW.
Wow, what a journey. And when you were at, Google and Meta and you held these executive positions, did you feel any gender bias towards you? And if so, how did you manage that?
I think what was interesting is often I didn't necessarily feel gender bias towards me, but there were certain signals that were out there that became obvious over time. I used to joke that at Google, while we had many leaders, many people I looked up to, if ever they didn't know who to hire for a position, they would just get the tallest guy with the best hair. And it was almost a little bit comical. And we had many amazing leaders, obviously, Susan at YouTube, Sheryl Sandberg, we had many, but it was just sort of this moment where if they didn't know what to do, they fell back on this archetype that we know. And many of those leaders were also great, but it just gave this sense of, hey, we're not really breaking the curve. We're not setting a model for diversity. And the message that you receive in that, as a woman is like, hey, like tall guy with great hair, like I may have great hair, but I'm never going to be tall. So what is the leadership model that I should be looking up for? Is there a place for me? And so, there were certain messages that I tried not to internalize. One of the people that I really looked up to and that was a model for me through all this was Carol Bartz. I had an opportunity while I was at Stanford to meet her. She was former CEO of YouTube. She was former CEO of Yahoo, former CEO of Autodesk. I did a seminar on Silicon Valley with her. And one of the things she said was that as a female leader, it's hard until you get to a certain point. She was someone who was the only computer science graduate in her class, was living in a different era of Silicon Valley that was even less friendly to women. But once she hit the CEO level, it started to be an advantage because she started to be the only female CEO in the room. And she started to get invited to the White House as, a luminary in Silicon Valley. And she even said, as the CEO of Autodesk, I wasn't going to be in the room in the White House for top CEOs. It wasn't one of the top tech companies. But as the female CEO, she was getting that noticed. And so I think what I took from that was your authenticity and your story is your advantage. And of course, you're not going to look like everyone before you. But I think that you can realize that when you offer a different perspective, it makes you unique. And the more you can lean into that power, the more successful you can be. And I think I did really take from that advice and lean into that throughout my career at Google and Meta. And I would always notice it most when I was leaving those companies, because that's when people feel the opportunity to be really honest with you. When I left Google, some of my employees, said, hey, we really look up to you as a leader because, you're one of the few people who is not afraid to really be a woman at Google, to wear dresses, to be friendly, to bring your true personality. And I got pretty much the same feedback as at Meta as well. One of my employees that was a true rock star, I'm sure I'll be reporting to her one day, she said, hey, at previous companies, the female leaders, they always felt that they had to conform to a certain model. As they moved up, they became more stiff, more masculine, more by the book. And you're someone who just continued to be the person you are, continue to be optimistic, continue to be friendly, to continue to be the servant leader that I am in terms of cheering for my team. And I think that was really motivating, especially to my female employees that are saying, hey, I want to be a leader, but I also want to be myself. And I want to look up to someone who is unapologetic about the space that she holds and the fact that as, an optimistic, fresh-faced, fun person, you can be a leader and you don't have to conform to this model that someone else made and that never really fit what you thought was worth it as a human. So I think that really guided me, and I felt grateful to get that advice from Carol and hopefully live it out in my own career in Silicon Valley.
Thank you for sharing that nugget with us. I love how you've always leaned into your authenticity, and this explains so much of why you do what you do at World of Women. Like, I've always known your story, but this is like a deeper level into it. And it's also cool that you always had female mentors to look up to and to learn from. I think it's a super important part of a woman's journey to just see representation in those senior levels, because you want to know that a playbook exists. Even if you're the one who has to make changes to it, you're the one who has to make or break existing ways of doing things, it's just always reassuring to have that representation in senior positions, because at least you know that it's possible. Tell us a little bit about how it was to transition into C-suite at World of Women. I know that this is something that you've always looked up to doing, since Sheryl Sandberg was also one of your mentors, but yeah, share your experience with this whole transition.
It's been phenomenal. I would say that with each job that I've had in my career, it's always just become one step closer to becoming your full self, right? I think what I loved about being at Google was I was so into the mission, at that time, it was really about accessibility of information for all at a time when there was not a lot of equal access to information. And I felt really strong that this was a mission-driven company for me, right? I always felt that learning was something that everyone had the right to. Information was an equalizer, and we were doing that. And then at Meta, I think what was really cool was that whole culture was about authenticity, and not just about information, but about being your authentic self. Through social media, I think we see a lot of different sides to ourselves. And so that was really the lessons I took from that. But WoW was a place where I felt that the mission of women empowerment, the mission of creating this space in the next generation of tech, and the fact that we were doing so from something that I felt passionate about in terms of rooted in art and creativity. We've all been used to these tech companies where it's like, let's do the technology first, and then let's think about the consequences later. I feel WoW was just born from this idea of, we're going to have a mission, but we're also going to have art be at the center. And we're going to be on the ground floor of Web3. And really try to set this whole industry on the right tone, because we are so early. And I do believe that, WoW inspired many other projects that are well needed and are awesome and are building on each other in terms of showcasing that if we have diversity in this space, it will be positioned to win as the next generation of technology. So it felt really good coming into a company where I felt like I could be my full self, work on everything that I was passionate about in my life. And then challenging as well, in the sense as you guys know, startups are always on. And so there's cost to that. Web3 is always on, and going in any Discord, I think we all know that, especially when you're working so hard at something, that can be really tough and really challenging. But I think what fuels me is the purpose of it, and knowing that if we're successful, we're changing a generation of technology. We're changing how girls and women and humans that have felt excluded in the past will view themselves. And so it's worth it to have that extra pressure and extra intensity, because we're making the world a better place.
Yep, I think our mission to make the world a better place by building an inclusive future is worth all the pressure that we've been under. And we're super grateful to the community for continuing to hold us accountable. Passing the mic to Mitoshi now.
Yeah, you all work so hard to drive this mission forward, and the work for me personally does not go unnoticed. I know that there's so much behind the scenes. And I'm wondering, you mentioned that there have been challenges. Do you mind, because we like to dig deep here, can you maybe specify a few personal challenges? And then on the flip side, some of the joys of working as COO for WoW?
I think some of the biggest personal challenges are just seeing how difficult this industry is on mental health. I see it all the time across the industry. And I would say that mentally, it can be really, really tough in this industry, not only because of the always on nature, but just because it can be so personal. I think we've all had the experience where, you work really hard on something, and then the first thing that you see is really tough, but also maybe really right on feedback about how it can improve. And you're sort of in this intense feedback cycle. I often liken it to feedback from your family, right? It's really personal. You care. They know you the best. And I think that sometimes it can be really, really tough living up to that and being in that constant whirlwind. So I think that I see that, especially for those that maybe have roles that are not as public, but are thrust into our community, it can feel really hard because it's not just, a senior CEO that, is used to being in the public eye. It's members of your team that maybe just started a few months ago, like worked really hard on something, see feedback about it, and maybe don't have necessarily the stamina to really deal with that at that point. And so I think that is the piece that's really tough just on me personally, because I want to make sure that we are supporting our teammates and creating a safe environment for them, and feeling like we're doing everything we can to make one of the best work environments in Web3, but knowing that Web3 is not a work environment that is always friendly to everyone. So we do have a counselor on staff at WoW, which I'm really proud of. And I think it's really important that leaders think through how they are supporting their teammates, for their mental health, because we need it, especially in this really, really intense industry.
I thought I knew a lot about the positions that are held at WoW, but I didn't know that there was a counselor on staff. That's amazing.
We have a really good culture at World of Women that we're continuously improving, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it. Tell us a little bit about how you feel in, just mental health wise. This space is 24/7, 365 days a year. How are you dealing with it, and what do you do to set boundaries to just ensure that you don't burn out?
I think it's really critical. Kashfi may know this, but sometimes I can be sort of a broken record on this, because I will just repeat to the team that health is number one, because I really do believe it. Because if we don't have our health and we aren't keeping really well care of ourselves mentally and physically, you're not going to have the endurance needed for this industry. And it was true in tech, and it's even more true in Web3. So for me, my mornings are all about fueling for the rest of the day. If you follow me on Instagram, it's like I wake up, I have a whole routine. It's like I drink water, I do yoga, I journal my intentions, I think through what I want to achieve in the day. I have a gratitude reflection. It's all around fueling myself physically and mentally for the day ahead. But I also think it's really necessary. I think that if you don't go into the day totally full, you're just going to be completely depleted. So I feel really strong about that. And I try to be really open about that too, to the team, that this is something that I want them to feel comfortable doing, whatever is their thing that fuels them. Yams is cooking, mine is yoga, whatever is the thing that fuels you and makes you feel whole is the thing that we have to prioritize, because you're not feeling lit up inside. You're not going to light up those around you. You're not going to be able to light up the community. So it's really, really critical to put that into your routine and protect it in the same way that you protect a one-on-one with your boss or an important meeting with a partner. I think at times it can feel like our own cup is the one that we have to take from in order to feed everyone else's. But I think that you have to really protect that time for yourself. Otherwise, everything else is going to degrade. So that's how I've been approaching it. I think the big challenge with WoW, honestly, for me, has been time zones. Our team is based in Europe, and I'm based in the East Coast of the US. And so I feel this pressure that immediately as I wake up, Europe has already been awake. And the more time I spend doing yoga and meditating, the more time I'm losing that in-person time with Europe. And so that can be tough. So I feel like I really identify with those that, that are always making sacrifices from their own routine. But I also realize that it's an important balance and an important precedent to set that that's important to take time for yourself.
And so many people that we've spoken with, in high profile positions or just day to day, women and leaders who are successful in what they do, they all have some sort of morning routine that they do. Like even Kashfi, she journals every morning. Like that's something that is important to her. So I love that you lead with that and that you empower everyone at WoW to do the same.
Yeah, I think just small routines set you up for success for the rest of your day. So journaling, yoga, it's all really good stuff that I also advocate for a lot, as Mitoshi knows. I would love to dig a little deeper into what it was like for you in the when you took on a role at Google or Meta, or when you were studying at Stanford. Did you ever have this sense of imposter syndrome? And if yes, how did you deal with it? Because it is very common for the more conversations I have with women, the more I learn that, okay, everyone feels like an imposter. It's a thing, it's a problem. And we need to be having conversations around how to deal with it in a healthy way, because we cannot keep doubting ourselves into oblivion. So yeah, I would love to learn how you've been dealing with it.
I have a lot of thoughts on imposter syndrome. So let me start by saying that I really do think imposter syndrome is in some degree because offices and corporate life have a certain archetype of what success looks like. And for the US, it's if you're male, if you're cisgender, if you're white, that is what great looks like. That's what someone who's not an imposter looks like. And I think it breeds for all of us who feel that they have a point of diversity, that they don't fit that archetype, that, we feel we're imposters because we are not meeting this really narrow cookie cutout that has been made. There was a really great, I think it was an HBR article about that, about how, imposter syndrome has been slightly bred from that. And the more we create diverse offices, the more we have diverse leaders, the more likely it is that people will feel that they're not an imposter because they see leaders and teammates and people who are successful that look like them and that are succeeding. So I just want to put that out there because I know that most people I work with, whether they fit the archetype or not, they do feel imposter syndrome. I think that was extremely clear when I was at Google and when I was at Meta. Part of your job as a leader is doing one-on-ones with your team, helping coach them for success. And I would say probably 85 to 95% of the people that I work with, they have some moment of doubt that they are an imposter, that they're not right, they're not up for this challenge. And it is heartbreaking because especially at a lot of these places, you're working with people who have been the best and they've been the best their whole lives. Our hiring model at Google was really just hire the smartest people from all the Ivy League schools, right? And now I think that you would look back on that and say, was that really an inclusive hiring strategy? But it was also an interesting case study because you had so many people on your team that had always been the straight A student, throughout school, got to Google and then felt that it was such a mistake, that there was a blip in the hiring process and that some huge mistake has been made and they've gone under the radar and they're hanging on, but at some point they're going to be discovered. And it's really heartbreaking to see that over and over again, to see a generation of people that are the smartest, most inspirational people that that are feeling really insecure and horrible all the time. So I do think it's something that we need to work on in the workforce and personally and in society, because it just really breaks my heart that so many people who are so well qualified and doing excellent work every day are not feeling that they belong. And it's part of why the mission of inclusion for WoW is so meaningful for me, because we want to create a place where people feel really recognized for the talents they bring, and that they feel really included and they have that opportunity to succeed. On my own standpoint, I will say something controversial. And I did get made fun of this. I actually went to an offsite at Meta and was telling a little bit my story about how I had got there. And I admitted, at this offsite, it was one of those offsites where everyone is kind of going around in a circle telling their story. And I admitted that I did not have imposter syndrome. And everyone kind of started laughing at me. They were like, why? You should, was kind of the message, right? And I think the reason that I didn't, and this was a huge gift that Google gave to me, was, at the time when I joined Google, it was really a lot of just smart kids figuring it out. Search was new. No one had done it before. The whole model was, let's get smart people and let's figure it out. And it was pretty common that speakers would come to Google, like give a talk and look out on the crowd and just see, all these people who are in their early 20s who probably look like they're in college, and just be totally baffled. They were like, this is Google? Like, who's in charge? Like, this is just a bunch of kids. Like, I can't even believe it. But the lesson that I took from that was that if you're willing to learn and you're willing to work hard and you're passionate about what you're doing, like, no one is more qualified than you. Sure, there's times when I'm out of my depth. I mean, I feel that all the time. Like, why did I think I could take a job in Web3 and not be good at Twitter? Like, that was blind confidence. Like, I probably should not have been hired. Like, sure, there's moments. But at the same time, like, I feel confident that I can learn. And I feel confident that that if I ask for help and if I practice and if I'm focused and I learn from the best, that I can improve. And if it's not the right thing, we can find the right person to work on it. So I think that the message I would have for anyone who's feeling imposter syndrome now is just know that, even in really, really high stakes scenario, a lot of people are making up they don't have a playbook. They're relying on hard work and the fact that they're dedicated and their passion. And if you are working in a position that you are passionate about and that you love, you shouldn't have to feel like an imposter, because you have the skills inside you to succeed.
Yeah, this is one of the most reassuring things you've ever said, and I'm going to remember it for a long time, because I've personally I am dealing with imposter syndrome quite a bit, because you feel like, what the hell, I'm 20 years old, should I be here? Do I deserve a seat at the table? But every time I speak with you, I feel like, yes, I'm passionate about the mission. I'm willing to outwork the self-doubt, and that's what's super important. But just while we're also speaking about imposter syndrome, is there anything that you would say to women who want to work in Web3? Are there challenges that they need to be prepared for? And what is something that they should know before they decide to get into this?
I think just the biggest thing to know is why you're in the space. Because if you have a strong why, everything else will fall away. I think a lot of the things that become challenges is when you don't have purpose alignment, you don't have value alignment, and then every struggle gets a lot harder. And so for people who are just entering, I think what I would say is find that one true thing that you're really passionate about. And it can be something really small. It can be, I want to learn this very specific skill. Focus there, nail it, feel confident, connect it to your why and what you want to achieve. Because then that sort of nexus of confidence can start to expand out in the same way that ripples expand out when you throw a stone in the water. When you have that reason that you're there, I think everything becomes easier. And so I give the advice of focus on the one thing that you're passionate about very, very deeply, learn it, enjoy it, find confidence in that process, and then let that confidence expand to other areas where there may be challenges, there may be obstacles, but at least you'll know the purpose that you're finding.
That is so wholesome. I love it. Before we Before we move on to the next question, I do want to say, Shannon, you've been killing it at the Twitter game. I just pinned one of Shannon's recent tweets for you all to look at. She's been working super hard to show up for the community and is like inspiring everyone else on the team as well. So thank you for that.
So Shannon, touching on what you were talking about before, I think another thing that I found helpful, because, in the space, it's very in your face. It moves so quickly. It's so easy to compare, whether you're a builder, a trader, a creator, somebody's always doing something bigger and better than you. That's what it feels like. But I personally found, finding my people is important, and everyone's going through something and everybody feels it. So just finding people that you can connect with and talk to, and, don't be scared to send a message and, kind of see if you can bounce off your feelings with somebody. Like, I found my people in the WoW community, and I'm grateful for that very early on. Like Kashfi and I were just talking about it before the call, like, just grateful for you all. But yeah, I think that's important. And, do you have any suggestions for people who do want to get involved in communities like WoW? Like, how can they support the WoW's mission to build an inclusive future and to help other women who are dealing with?
I think that it's such a good point in terms of finding your tribe and finding your support. I was just looking at a great International Women's Day post that Sheryl Sandberg did about lean in circles. And what I thought was so cool about the post was she shared about how she started Lean In, which is basically this program where you get in a circle of other women where you can share your challenges. It went way beyond what she thought was possible. And then, she's going through a career transition right now, right? She left Meta as COO and is now in a different position. And she shared her Lean In circle, which was just the most insane group of badass leaders and Jada Pinkett Smith and all these people. But it was just a reminder to me that no matter where you are in your career, whether you're, just starting out in Web3 or, you've already been a senior leader at a tech company, like, you should always have people to lean on. And I think that my advice on this is to find communities both globally and locally that can support you. I think what's amazing about WoW is that if you don't have people in your local area that you can talk to, it allows you to connect to this incredible global network of women and allies and people that believe in our mission of inclusivity and inclusive future in Web3 and beyond. But then you can use that to build a local network of in-person people that can support you. Kashfi obviously is our incredible champion of our WoW meetups program, where community members can do local meetups in their location. And I think it's really important to have global networks that support your values, but then also people on the ground locally so that you feel like you have your tribe. I know that I've gotten a lot of value being in Miami, which I think is one of the best cities for women in crypto. We have a lot of fantastic local groups supporting women, a women in tech group, Michelle Ab's incredible Tuttle Tribe, NFT, which is a learning NFT that allows women and allies to gather. And so I think really thinking through your strategy of what's the most mission aligned group that I can join globally that will give me access to people beyond my local area. And for me, that's WoW. And then who are the people, kind of in my local proximity, whether it's, a ERG group in your office or a local happy hour in your industry, where you can find those people that can physically surround you so that you have that both local and global support.
Thank you for that answer.
Yeah, love that. Love in-person culture. Think it's super, super important to be able to have like a local network that you can rely on, or maybe even just a friend circle of people who are passionate about things. Maybe they're not even from your industry, but they're ambitious and they get it, and you can exchange notes from your respective playbooks. But tell us a little bit about what you do for fun. Like, the community knows that you're super into aerial stuff, even yoga, but we want to hear more. How did those, like, what's the origin story of these habits? And let's dig a little deeper into how that came.
Well, I am someone who believes that the more full your life is, the more you fill yourself with passions, the more that gives you strength in other areas of your life. I think that there can be a lot of things to juggle at once, your family, your career, your personal life, your friends. But I'm someone who strongly believes that, if at least one of those is going well, that energy and positivity and confidence that you get from that can emanate and put a positive trajectory on the rest of your life. So I have always tried to cultivate passions and try new things and learn. For many years, I was the person who always had a really immersive and big new hobby. There was a year where I was like, I'm going to learn how to write a screenplay, and I got really into it. And then as a result of that, I was like, okay, I can't have a hobby where I'm on the computer because I'm already on the computer all day. So I need to have a more physical hobby. That led me to get more into yoga and more into the aerial arts. I'm also really into immersion. There's something called the flow state where you feel completely immersed in what you're doing. And once you get into the flow, it helps your brain kind of operate in a more intuitive way. It gets you into this rhythm. And so I find that for me, doing things like yoga, aerial arts, I'm into stand-up paddleboarding, they all get me into this flow state where I don't need to think about many other things. I can just focus on that activity at hand. It makes my brain completely at peace. And then I find that a lot of the things and the challenges that I may be thinking about outside of, in a work context, my brain just works better having gotten into that flow state into a hobby. So I am someone that's a huge advocate of finding a passion like that can help you get into a flow state and then translating the flow that you get into other areas of your life.
To learn more about this immersion and flow state practice, is this a form of meditation?
I will send you, I went into a deep dive onto this. I will send you some Instagram stories I did about flow state. There's actually a couple good books on it, but ultimately it's about feeling that you're completely at peace and you naturally flow, whether it's physically or mentally. And a lot of times they've done studies of high performance athletes or executives, and a lot of the things that they attribute to their success is their ability to focus and really get into a flow state in how they're working and performing. And it does translate, I would say, into my approach as a COO, because I do really believe in flow. A lot of times I will try to, set our goals and objectives really clearly, have a clear plan, force the team to kind of think through what the plan can be, because the more you have a plan, the more you have the structure to just be in the moment. And all of that is based on the fact that I want my team to be in a flow state to achieve their best results together. And so it does influence how we think about operations at WoW and, having a plan and a structure so that you can really be in the moment and enjoying and getting the most fulfillment about what you're doing. I would say at a startup, you don't always feel in the flow. Sometimes you just feel that there are many things happening, which is also okay, but it is an ideal state that I keep in my mind.
Yeah, I think Tuesdays are really good for flow because WoW has this internal policy of no meetings Tuesdays that Shannon put forward. There was a point where we were all just like, okay, there's way too many meetings and we need to carve out time to get actual work done, to do some deep work related tasks. And that's kind of how this policy was introduced. Shannon, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's just about finding the balance. A lot of breakthrough thinking comes from deep work, and deep work rarely happens in the 15-minute break between when you did your last meeting and when you have your next meeting. And so similarly, how I really believe strongly in protecting that time for journaling or yoga or whatever kind of fills you up, I do think that you should protect time for deep work. That's why we instituted No Meeting Tuesdays, because we wanted people to feel not guilty about saying, hey, I have 4 hours of deep work I need to do to fully excel at my job. Everyone else is doing their deep work at the same time, and be freed of that pressure. Does it always work? No, sometimes there's a really important meeting that happens, but I think the intention is there and making space and trying to synchronize our team so that we believe that it's equally important to give that time for you to succeed on your task personally, and then also time to coordinate and push each other and do all the collaboration that we do as a global company.
Wow, Shannon, thank you so much. I feel like we need to be mindful of your time, but I have to say, I feel like I learned so much more about you on a deeper level, and I really appreciate you opening up so much and being so honest with us all.
Oh, I so appreciate the opportunity.
This has just been such a good conversation. We talked about imposter syndrome, about Shannon's journey through the years. This just makes me think about like how every woman is on her own journey, figuring it out. And it is so important for us to be creating a culture where that's celebrated instead of something that is stressed about. You know, a lot of us worry about our professions and whether we're doing enough or being enough or tweeting enough even. And conversations like this are really a safe space for so many of us.
That was so good. Thank you so much for opening up so much. I really, I learned a lot about you.
Oh, thank you so much for the thoughtful questions. Hopefully, I know you're trying to like push. I was like, oh my gosh, like sometimes I feel that, in these deep interviews, like I don't have a deep trauma. And so like my one version of imposter syndrome is like, I don't have a traumatic enough background to like, to share my pain. So I was, oh my God, I just have to be honest about this. Like I don't have secret imposter syndrome. So I hope that didn't come off as like, whoa, look at me. Like, but I wanted to just be really truthful about that.
I think you're setting a standard for what the normal should be. Like this is what everyone should feel, especially like younger women, and it's good to see like an example of someone who doesn't tout themselves as much. So it was good. It was great.
Well, I mean, I just think it's such a bunch of bullshit. It's like, oh, everyone has imposter syndrome. You should feel it too because you're not some like 7 foot tall guy with big hair. And it's like, no. That whole thing is totally broken. And they're breaking all of us by forcing us to fit into it. So that's what I was trying to communicate. So hopefully some of it came through.
No, it came across well.
It's a sad state on human potential that all these smart and amazing people are feeling so broken inside. It's like, what the fuck? Like, not cool. We need to fix it. And that's why we do WoW. I mean, that's not more complicated than that.
Oh, yeah, no, I love that. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much. Thanks for your time. Bye. Have a great day. Bye. And good night, Cash.
Good night.